For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dlamini. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
Today we are talking about human rights as we are celebrating Human Rights Day tomorrow. Do you think South Africans know about their rights?
You know, there was a lot of effort at one point to distribute the Constitution very widely. That's why you got this small copy of the Constitution. And in the rural areas, there are a lot of people who can't read, but people have told them that in the Constitution there is this, that and the other right. And sometimes when there are public hearings, some of these old mamas go there and they hold up the Constitution because they say they want what's in here. So that I think people are unevenly aware. Some people are very aware, and it also depends on public education. And I think the problem is that the ANC, that is the biggest organization in the country, has not spent enough time educating people about their rights, communicating about those rights. In some cases, they have used their positions to suggest that some rights on the Constitution, under the Constitution, are dependent on voting for the ANC, like social grants. There was a KZN MEC who suggested that, you know, you shouldn't be voting for another party because the ANC is giving you these rights. So I think people are unevenly aware of it, but the problem about being aware of rights is that if your rights are being abused, are the institutions responsive to your needs? Do you have the money to get a lawyer? Will the police take a proper statement? A whole lot of other things. So I'm not in a position to say how well aware South Africans are of their rights. I think there is a human rights constitutional structure, but whether it has transformed into a human rights culture, I'm not sure.
We know that the Human Rights Commission was inaugurated in '95 under the Human Rights Act 54 of 1994. But still, South Africans are still battling with issues like schools not receiving textbooks on time. And we know of Engcobo Church recently that was not allowing their kids to go to school. People are around 21 years now and they've never been to school because this church believes that going to school is, they teach evil things. What should government be doing to people like that?
You know, there are a whole lot of things. You were referring first to education department not meeting its needs, and you've got situations where organizations like Equal Education, which is not the only one but the main one, has been doing a lot of protesting all over the country, basically trying to get schools to abide by basic norms for infrastructure, so you don't have children drowning in pit toilets and things like this, which happened last week for at least the second time. There may be other times. And luckily, some NGOs are assisting these social movements because the people who form the movement that protests don't usually have the resources to bring a legal case. And they've been assisted, and there's one case in Grahamstown at the moment, but this is one of many cases. There were cases about the textbooks, and they had to drag the department back to court over that. There have been cases about infrastructure, and now they're having them again. As regards these other things like the churches and other situations, the authorities would have to investigate thoroughly. The Human Rights Commission has been doing that, but in addition to the Human Rights Commission, the governmental ministry and departments responsible for this would have to liaise with the police in order to ensure that all people have the right to an education which is part of their rights under the Bill of Rights.
As a political analyst, Raymond, how should South Africans be celebrating this day?
Well, I think the word I use is marking this day, because we celebrate a constitution which has a Bill of Rights and is one of the most advanced constitutions in the world in terms of the rights that are recognized and are advanced in the constitution. But it's hard to celebrate it when many people are not able to access the rights under the law. They're not able to access those rights, partly because they don't know they've got those rights, because there's not been the diffusion of human rights law and understandings. They're not organizations that have the capacity to do this, and government is not doing it adequately. On the other hand, if you have a human rights abuse and you go to the police station, we know that the police are not functioning very well, that dockets are lost, that sometimes drive people away and say, sort this out. If your husband's been beating you up, they say, well, that's a family matter, sort it out with your husband. Things like this. So you have a problem at the police, you have a problem at the prosecuting authority, and I think it's also a mistake to think that judiciary, which starts at the lowest level, traditional courts perhaps, magistrates, Supreme Court, the courts are not always exemplary. Some of the statements, some of the sentences for rape, for example, trivialize the character of the rape. Some judgments have said that the way this child was raped was really causing the minimal of hurt to her. It was not aggressive and all this sort of thing. And then sometimes the person gives a lower sentence. I think there's a compulsory sentence for many of these things, and they often are not observed. So that we have to have institutions that work. We have to have a government that is committed to the rule of law. One of the characteristics of the Zuma era has been undermining of legality. Now, myself, I used to undermine legality under apartheid, and it was legitimate, in my view, to oppose the law, which was a rights-denying law under apartheid. So I consciously broke the law because I was trying to defeat an oppressive government and an oppressive constitution. Now we have a constitution that is rights-bearing. Our job is to diffuse those rights, strengthen those rights, advance those rights.
Now, I read this morning that the DA mayor in Cape Town, Patricia de Lille, is saying that she is not attending a 4-day hearing tomorrow. Apparently, the DA wanted her to be there. And she's saying that the DA does not respect human rights. What does this say for the DA?
Well, you know, if you and I, as private citizens, stay at home or go to a restaurant on Human Rights Day, it is very different from a political organization. If you are a representative of a political organization, you ought to be going to a Human Rights Day activity on that day. The DA should be organizing celebrations or marking of Human Rights Day and educating the public about those things, or even going from door to door distributing the Bill of Rights or the Constitution, things like that. So that to hold a hearing on that day is wouldn't really be so serious if it were an accountancy firm in the city. If they were having a disciplinary hearing for one of their staff, it would be undesirable, but would not carry the same message as a public organization that is supposed to be advancing human rights.
And lastly, we heard of the news this morning that Cyril Ramaphosa, our president, suspended Tom Moyane as boss. Any comment on that?
Well, I think on the face of it, or as they say in law, prima facie, there's a lot of cases that could potentially be brought against Tom Moyane, and there's a lot of irregularities, and the capacity of SARS has been destroyed during his tenure as commissioner, with this fake rogue unit and the forcing out of people, dismantling of key structures of the organization. So it's about time that he went, and the appointment now is an acting appointment. No doubt they will think very, very carefully about finding a permanent commissioner who will be able to restore the Revenue Service to its previous standing. It was a very, very impressive organization, because until Pravin Gordhan became a commissioner about 1997 or 6 or something like that, till he became commissioner, there had never been a situation where they collected more than they expected, and it kept on increasing. With Moyane, targets were not met, and the country is already heavily indebted, and if the tax is inefficiently collected and there are irregularities with it, it actually makes the economic situation much worse.
Thank you, Professor.
Thanks very much.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Crima Media's Polity about human rights.